Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Flight to Recovery webinar. We have about 105 people who have joined us today, and I guess people run late for meetings, so I'm sure about 2-3 minutes later, we'll have more. All right, so welcome everyone, and thanks a lot for joining this webinar. I'm sure you're coming in from different time zones, so really appreciate joining us, whether it's your morning or late at night. And so have our panelists. So really appreciate different panelists coming in from various time zones and making things happen. It's going to be a great blend of Southeast Asian, US, and UK perspectives. So I'm looking forward. So in today's agenda, we'll look at 4 things. We'll breeze past some of the information that we wanted to share with everyone. And this was about the latest merger that Isentia and Access Intelligence went through. And things are getting very exciting. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll move on to what can you expect from the webinar and the meat of this discussion about the panel and the themes and insights we'll share about travel, and then the expertise that we'll be bringing from our panelist side. And finally, we'll wind up this webinar with audience Q&A. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope everyone is. Right now, we have 109 people. Let's get started. All right, so the first update from us is we are going global. I'm sure you might have heard about it from the news. The conversation started in June in public media, and there was an acquisition of Isentia from Access Intelligence, which is based in Europe, UK, and US. And now APAC player as well as a global player is coming together. We are getting global. And this is what it means for our clients and for the wider industry. We would be having a combined customer base of about 5,000 plus, a strong workforce of about 1,000 employees, and this is all experts in media intelligence and insights, a wingspan of about 6 continents, and then building onto the client database and really helping the industry move to the next phase of social listening as well as mainstream media intelligence, blending it up together from an insights point of view as well as intelligence. We have different tools coming in together, so we'll talk more about it. All right, so let's get into this webinar. And in this webinar, we'll be sharing some insights from some of the tools that we have and also listening from the panelists. So what can the audience expect from this webinar? So the first thing is, why is this webinar happening now in October? And is travel being the topic that's coming in for the first time? Definitely not. We have gone through the false hopes before, and I guess this time it might be for real. We see 3 catalysts coming together. The first one is the COVID pill, the most hyped COVID pill that might be coming in and getting FDA approval, which means that as people recover from home, they can also take a pill and just do it. We also see consumer demand. As travel opens up and as borders open up, we see websites of countries crashing, which means that there is a suppressed demand. And as the play button goes, the websites crash, which is a good thing for travel sector. And the last one is governments are preparing for COVID to become an endemic. And all it means is that it's going to be business as usual. Hopefully the virus goes away at some point, but the show is going on. So now we have our panelists, and our panelists will be bringing different expertise. So let's hear it from the panelists on what they're looking forward to and about the experience. We start with Johna.
Thank you so much, Prashant. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And I am the CEO of AMEC, which is the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communications. And we have global members who are media intelligence firms and communication and PR professionals. So we have ongoing discussions on a regular basis that are quite exciting and looking at the future of what's going to happen with data, with communication, with analysis, and how that's going to influence the behaviors is a very exciting time for us. And I come from the PR and IR side of the business, so being able to now look around the corner at some of these elements and how data is so influential to the people who notoriously hate math, it is a brave new world for all of us. And so I would say as we all move forward together, we have exciting times ahead.
Thank you, Johna. Let's move to Jake.
Thanks, Prashant. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me. Prashant's already done a great job of introducing the organization that I'm from. So I'm the Global Vice President of Research and Insight at Access Intelligence. So Prashant and I are now colleagues and super excited to be collaborating on this and longer term. My background is very much in digital data and analytics. I built and led the international insight function at Twitter and similar roles at Deliveroo and other tech organizations as well. So bringing to this conversation a perspective from EMEA and the UK specifically, but also a perspective from social and digital as an insight professional.
Perfect. Thanks, Jake. We move to Riad.
Hi, thanks for having me. Obviously, I run the AirAsia part of the business in Malaysia. We're one of the largest AOCs in the group. It's been obviously very clear here that it's been a tough 2 years for the airline industry, but there's some form of light at the end of the tunnel. I'm really hoping to share as much as I can with regards to what we've gone through for the last 2 years, and I think this platform is just perfect for me to maybe tell a story of sorts.
Thank you, Riad. And last but not the least, the company that got us vaccines. So we must thank J&J. Over to you, Vishy.
Thanks so much, Prashant, and thanks so much for having me here. My name is Vishy. I'm a Senior Marketing Director for Johnson & Johnson across Southeast Asia. Johnson & Johnson is one of the companies, it's a diversified healthcare company across pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and consumer health. My experience has largely been in consumer goods marketing, and Southeast Asia has been a core part of what I've done for the last 15 plus years. So really excited to be here. I think, and I would love to share some perspectives through the course of the discussion in terms of what I've learned. I'm by no means a travel expert, but definitely have learned and picked some things along the way. So hope to share a bit and learn a bit from the other panelists as well.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, panelists. And just a quick audience count. We have about 130 audience joining us from various parts of the world. So thanks again. All right, so let's move on to the themes for today. And we are going to share some insights as well as hear it from the experiences of our panelists. So let's go to the first theme, and the first theme is going to be the future of travel. This is has become one of the rhetorical questions. What is it going to be? Is it going to go back to 2019, or is it going to be hybrid, or is it going to everything is going to change? We don't know, to be honest. And what we did was we looked at the evolving data and see what's happening in travel. So what we did was we pulled out one of our tools called Pulsar, and Pulsar looks into audience intelligence. And because of Pulsar, we are able to pull out the last 1 week of data. I had to take about 24 hours to prepare the deck. So sorry if it's not super current. Until yesterday, we have the data, and here's what the world in travel looks like. So on your left-hand side, you would see a bunch of network. And this network is all about the conversations. We are going to get into those conversations later, but let's look at how the world looks like from an emoji perspective. When people are talking about travel, what kind of emojis are they using? And based on these emojis, does it look like travel is back? I think it might be. The reason being, if you look at the top, you would see the cameras coming in, or the flying rockets, or you have some cities and their flags coming in, or you might see the aeroplanes and the hearts and the time. And timer might be something which might be about the clock is ticking. I need to really travel, and people are applauding, which means I think travel is back. And if you look at on the right-hand side, there's a map of Southeast Asia and the kind of conversations that are happening from various markets. And every country is in a different continuum of where the travel is. So you have someone like Philippines, where domestic travel has opened up, and in Malaysia, but you have Singapore, where international travel has opened up. Some of the sort of emotions and the sentiment that we pick up in the right-hand side, Philippines, Manila looks to be pretty positive. Jakarta is, but Shah Alam, there is something going on in terms of negativity around travel. So we look at some of those perspectives, but broadly speaking, looks like travel is back. We also look at some of the questions that people may have, because not everybody interacts on social media. We have passive majority as well, the silent majority, how they interact on using engagement such as likes and shares, but also people who think about and type the how-to questions on Google. And the map on your right-hand side actually talks about that. So you have travel related questions in the minds of people and what kind of questions are they Googling essentially. So this data set picked up from the last week looks into people are worried about travel for unvaccinated and are also thinking about travel for seniors. Some people are wondering, can they travel for work or can they take their work along with the travel? Again, some people are influencers creating content, might be looking at hashtags called travel is my therapy. So if you look at the questions around and what people are thinking, looks like travel is back again. And some of the nuggets that you can think of when you're designing your next campaign or even feeding it into a rapid product development. Again, all this data is brought to you by Pulsar, and this is from Google. So let's start to look at some of the fresh trends that we picked up from the last week, and travel changes. So every day you have new trends, and some of these trends will tie back to what's the future of travel and what it alludes to. So the first trend that we picked up was the really rising tide in Germany, and this is among the Japanese and Singaporean travelers. So let's put things in perspective. Why Germany suddenly? If you look at the data from 2019, when things were okay, we saw that Germany was at number 7 in the priority list of Japanese travelers. And this is all Asia data. So we will be taking you through insights, we'll be taking you through different regions. So this is Japan now. Germany was number 7 in terms of priority list for Japanese travelers. And something that German tourism has been doing, which is all about yours truly Germany as a hashtag, has been picking up really well in Japan. And this data sets for the last 1 week tells you that people are very excited about Germany, as well as there's a volume of conversations that has just picked up. And these are all positive. Now, that was the quant part. Where's the call? Where's the story? And this is a story. This is exactly what German tourism is doing. And then influencers are picking it up. It's all about going back to either the carousel or either to the sort of places that we all wanted to go. Just have a look at this video posted out by a travel influencer in Singapore. And I would love to take this ride, which is kind of my COVID-free ride because it's really socially distant. You're getting into the nature, but in a safer way. So something that was really picked up among social media in Singapore. The other trend that we saw, this was international, German, Japan, as well as Singapore. Now, what's happening on a domestic side? So Philippines and Malaysia have opened up for domestic tourism. And what we start to see is, again, the network analysis and the kinds of conversations that are back. This is a segmentation of conversations. And what we pick up is some of the apprehensions as well as some of the excitement around travel domestically. So in Philippines, let's start to compare and contrast. So in Philippines, you have the public authorities talking about travel and people seem to be pretty receptive about it and they're looking forward to it. While in Malaysia, the health minister is leading from the front and they are talking and they're sharing and tweeting about it. And it's all about public being very excited about coming in from the ministry and the minister itself, and then how the curve is flattening and going down and how people are really getting opened up for domestic travel. Compare and contrast in terms of the spokespeople. Now bring it back to the panelist. We have seen some insights, and what do our panelists think in terms of where is travel going? Anyone can start.
Okay, I'll start first. From the perspective of the question here obviously is will it pick up from what we had in 2019 or 2018 or 2017? Will things change? I think, in all honesty, things will change. Obviously, travel is not the same as what it used to be. There are many new protocols, SOPs, in lieu of the safety aspects, not just managing aircrafts and how we fly, but more importantly, how we conduct ourselves getting into a plane. So I think things will change very much. And is it going to pick up immediately? I think it will take some time still, because there are a lot of getting used to. But that being said, the experience we've had these last couple of months, since September actually, when we had the privilege or the test bubble with the Langkawi Island, the demand was there. The pent-up demand amongst our people wanting to travel was clear, very, very clear. And the fact that we've sold, during a short period of time, we sold 250,000 seats. Up to today, we've sold 360,000 seats, just one island. So, the demand is definitely there. We will see that demand continuously become more relevant as we go into the months, and more importantly, when borders open. Obviously now Malaysia is more interstate. International, when it comes around, I'm pretty sure the same kind of demand will come into play, but it will still take time. Time in the sense that we have to be patient as an organization, because there are protocols in one country is different with another country. And we do hope that some level of uniformity across the region, at the very least, starts to take place, where it'll make it easy for everyone to fly in and out again. Not as probably as what we used to, but I think with all the enhancement that we have put in place, the protocols put in place as an airline, and similarly across all airlines that I see in the region, I think we will come to a point where the airline industry becomes sustainable again. But immediate, I would have to beg to differ at the moment, because going through 2 years of the challenge that we have seen, we ourselves have had to change a lot. But we have to sometimes just adjust and wait and see what's going to happen next. But obviously, the light is at the end of the tunnel for the airline industry for sure.
Thanks, Riad.
Let me go next here, because I think, definitely, I think this pandemic has been like sort of like a once in a lifetime kind of an experience. So it has really changed a lot of things, and for sure, in the context of travel, it will change things, at least for the foreseeable future. Let me touch upon one or two dimensions, particularly as it impacts like my work as well as the healthcare industry in general, as unique nuances here, versus Riad, who actually emphasized about the airline industry, which I think is one of the biggest, which is going to experience one of the biggest changes. In the context of business, right? I think there are two kinds of travel that are very prominent, particularly in the airline industry. I'm not counting like domestic transport with land transport, etc. But in this particular context, I think think about business travel versus leisurely travel. I think leisure travel, I definitely feel there is a lot of pent-up demand, and the fact that, hey, things will resume and people are really dying to get out. I myself, being one of them, I would be really keen to have that vacation and a bit of a respite as well. But the one piece, I think, which is also the cornerstone of many airline companies, is also that of business travel. And one of the things that I do foresee is a significant reduction in that. What has happened through the course of the last 1.5 odd years is the role of technology when it comes to communicating remotely. And that will for sure change the way business travel happens. In a given year, I used to be out of the country about 100 days of the year, and I foresee that that is going to be significantly smaller than that. So that is one big area that I do foresee as being a change. The second one, it's a minor aspect, but again, pertaining to the healthcare industry. I think travel are of different kinds. I think one that is a small breed of travel is medical tourism. And this is an industry that is also going to change significantly. So if you think about Singapore, if you think about Malaysia, if you think about the likes of Thailand, some of these countries are the beneficiaries of medical tourism from other markets. And it remains to be seen how the healthcare system starts opening up to receiving people from other countries for medical tourism. Because as of today, the healthcare systems are still swamped and are preparing themselves for COVID cases in each market. So how the healthcare system copes up and is able to open up for medical tourism is another thing that I believe will change in the future of travel.
Yeah, I'll offer a perspective from here. So building on what Vishy said, really, I think the answer is obviously yes, but how, right? And I think that's what we're all working through. There's clearly been some significant behavioral shifts, and the questions that I get asked as an insight professional more often than not is which of those behaviors changes are here to stay and which of those are just temporary for the course of the pandemic. And I think the shift that we're seeing and the new products and services that we're seeing and behaviors that we're seeing move digital as an insight professional creates a real opportunity, because all of that creates data. And there's a huge amount of data that we can use to analyze, to understand the patterns and the behaviors and provide a perspective on which ones are going to be here to stay and which ones aren't. You did a great job, Prashant, of walking through some of the capabilities of Pulsar, the tool that we have to do that, access intelligence. And I think the more we're trying to understand this kind of behavioral shift, the more we need to look to tools like Pulsar to understand what's the future going to be, and then how can our companies, our campaigns, our products adapt appropriately.
And I'll just add, as a consumer who flew 180,000 miles in 2019, now when I look at the, here in the US, there's been this very interesting cycle of the consumers who are traveling, and it isn't for business travel. It really is more of a leisure travel, but it's also breeding these bizarre stories of, duct taping passengers for refusing to wear masks, for, inciting riots, opening emergency doors. There's like, those are not my people. Like, that's all I can say. I spent a lot of time on a plane, like those are not my people. So I think, the future of travel is going to be very different, but I think it does boil down to something interesting that can be aided by communication. And during COVID, here in the US, we went to this kind of very interesting process where restaurants could deliver, and they could deliver alcohol. So now you could go pick up your food and you could take a drink with you. So drinking and driving, that's not on anybody's radar anymore. That's like, oh, that's okay. You just get it in a to-go cup. But for someone who travels a lot, even the most experienced travelers have a lot of anxiety about traveling, have a lot of anxiety about flying. And whether that's because they're leaving their family, they don't know if they can't remember if they turned the water off at home, like whatever that is, that breeds a lot of anxiety. And so without understanding those consumers, I think understanding causation and correlation of these behaviors is really critical. And one of the things that the US airlines did for this domestic travel is they told people they couldn't drink, so you can't drink on a plane. So now they've taken these anxious people in general, and now some of them, with families, trying to navigate some oftentimes difficult situations. They're traveling because they're going to a funeral. They're traveling for some really difficult situation, and they're telling them that they can have alcohol. That's like a powder keg of combustion after people have waited in exorbitant lines, paid exorbitant fees because of demand and everything. And so, there is this opportunity of communication to understand the internal audience. So to understand how to keep your employees safe, how to keep your employees invested in the consumer experience and what that is, and how to understand the consumer and setting and managing some expectations for them about, safety, security, risk, and liability, and just common decency amongst people. I think there is that mental health piece that I think we'll talk about. But when you have locked people in their homes with just their family, cage match style, for months on end, I mean, it is kind of this, like Lord of the Flies effect, and you see it now when people are out. And so, where is the grace and the humanity in that, and making sure that we're training our employees who are frontline workers for what that means, what those opportunities are, and also supporting them in that, that they have the tools that they need to be able to take care of themselves.
Thank you, Johna. And I love the cage fight analogy. Yes, that was happening at home for sure. And a really valid point on how to take care of employees as travels open up, because these are the last things that we think about, right? But employees are the travelers. So it brings us very nicely to the next theme, which is all about what's going to be the future of work. And while we have been discussing about those LinkedIn, some nonsensical polls around whether it's going to be a hybrid or it's going to be work from home and people are just going to get some LinkedIn likes, but it's not just about that. We recently saw that there is a wave going on, and that wave is all about the Great Resignation. And the Great Resignation is all about that millions of people are quitting around the world. And these are not just global waves. This is happening locally as well. As in Singapore, there was an article about why are people quitting, and then why are they traveling, and then they're taking sabbaticals, and what is the kind of frustration that has been built, or the kind of simmering issues that employees have had with their employers. Similarly, there's a subreddit that just talks about anti-work, and this has just happened. So the people are posting the angry resignation text and so on and so forth. But again, if you look at the global sort of underpinnings around it, it's all about that people are looking at work in a different way. And it goes beyond working from home, hybrid, etc. But it also looks into some of the nuances. So we want to play a video of Brian Chesky from Airbnb actually summing it up pretty well. So let's check this 3-minute video out.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you back on the show, as always. You have said that travel recovery has become the travel revolution. In a nutshell, what are the trends and stats you're seeing to back this idea that travel will never be the same?
Well, the reason travel is not going back to the way it was is because the world's not going back to the way it was. We used to live in one place, work in another, and travel to a third place. Now all those places are one place, and that place can be wherever we want. And so people are flexible. They can travel, many people, anytime, go anywhere, and many people can also live in many more locations. So flexibility is just totally changing the game for travel.
Now let's talk about the short term first. Take me out 1 year. Over the next year, what trends are you expecting in leisure and business travel?
Well, number one, there's going to be a huge shift from business travel to leisure travel. Business travel is not coming back in a big way in the next year because technology has replaced a lot of the need for business travel. But the more people are at home, the more they want to travel. But they're going to go everywhere. They're going to travel to like kind of cities, small towns, and rural communities. Now, hopefully next year, cross-border will recover. Once cross-border recovers, you're going to see a whole bunch of people not just traveling abroad, but even living abroad. And I also think summers are going to be more and more frequently times people go away and work remotely.
Let's go out a couple of years. You have repeatedly said that travel will never be the same. I've spoken to the CEO of Expedia who says travel is going to go back to the way it was, even business travel. Why am I getting such different opinions?
Well, the world's not going back to the way it was in 2019 any more than it's not going back to the way it was in 1950. And if that's the case, then travel is not going back to the way it was. This is the worst technology will ever be in our lifetime. It's only going to improve. So the world is going to continue to get more flexible. People are going to continue to have more options. And we're going to start to live in a world where all you have to believe is people don't go back to the office 5 days a week and that some business travel is curbed. If you believe those two things, then travel is never going to come back the way it was. It's going to be different. Now, I do think there's going to be a new golden age of travel. It's just going to be really different.
Leisure and business travel. How so? How do you think it's going to be different?
Well, leisure travel, I think you're going to see like a shift from people traveling just to big outdoor tourist hotspots. Like here in New York City, a lot of people go to Times Square. In San Francisco, they go to Fisherman's Wharf. Going forward, I think you're going to see a lot more people traveling to a lot more places. They'll still go to cities, but they're also going to go to small towns. They're going to go to national parks. They're going to spread out. People are going to go not just in Paris, but they're going to go to the south of France, central France. Number two, stays are going to be longer. Not everyone has to get back to the office. If bosses and employers become more flexible, people have more time to travel. 3-day weekends can happen every weekend for a lot of people if they just have a desk job at a computer. Many people are going to go away for summers. They're going to have longer trips. We're starting to see half of our business is longer than a week as far as stays. A fifth of our business are for stays that are a month or longer. That's not even travel. So what's going to happen is traveling, living, and blurring, traveling, living, and working are to blur together. That is going to fundamentally change the entire identity of travel.
All right, so
Getting this wrong, or they get Brian. Thank you so much for joining.
Sorry. Yeah. So let's get into some of the initial parts of the interview. Now, obviously, it suits Airbnb's business model in terms of working longer in an Airbnb and then, just really picking up the number of nights. And we do have conflicting views from Expedia, Booking.com. They are talking about a completely different engine. Let's localize it and let's look at what kind of perspectives do we bring to the table in terms of, is it going to be a longer travel time while working virtually, or is it going to have something else? What's the impact on business travel?
Okay, AirAsia again. one of the data points that we've been looking at, obviously, forecasting for the future, not just the near future, but also the later part of next year, so on and so forth. Yes, I would have to agree that the business side of things, the business travels will be very much lower than the leisure or visiting family or friends segments. That definitely will grow. And one thing about AirAsia is that that's always been our main core focus anyway. When we find new destinations, it's more for traveling for leisure more than business, actually. It just by chance, then, it creates a place of networking or a system where businesses can grow, so on and so forth. But yes, I think, with all the technology in place nowadays, here we are talking to each other in different time zones and whatnot, not having to travel in one place. It's something that we've all become very attuned to, or we've normalized it in many, many ways. And as the technology advances and more comfort then is embraced amongst the users, business-wise, I think, yes, there'll be a bit of, it will lag behind a bit. But I honestly believe that, at the end of the day, we still need to interact as humans. And it will come back, but maybe in forms that maybe not as much as before. But leisure definitely is one thing that will continue to grow and will continue to grow from here on, especially with the pent-up demand, so on and so forth. But then again, when you look at, then I turn to the fact on working conditions or working environment. For the last 2 years, as an operator, one thing about airlines, we can't stop. Yes, I don't fly as many aircraft as we used to, but operationally we still need to take care of it as though we were flying it. So operationally, never. What we saw was probably the back room. The back room, we had a hybrid of sorts. Work from home, come to the office when you need to. There was a bit of a balance, team A, team B, to manage the safety aspects of the COVID possible infection. But from an operating point of view, no one stopped us from flying. So we still need to maintain our aircrafts. I still needed to have my pilot certified, my cabin crew certified, and we were still flying, to be honest. So the experience that we had in the airline side of things is probably a bit different because operationally we still needed to be on the floor, but at a lesser time in that sense. Instead of coming in 5 times a week, we probably needed the manpower to be there around 3 days a week. But hybrid, yes, for sure, more towards the backroom support. How we are now approaching it going forward, obviously, there's some form of acceptance of this hybrid approach. We will still allow people to work from home, but at the same time, we allow them to come to work with the necessary protocols, like being fully vaccinated now, and testing before coming to work for my frontliners, for example, so on and so forth. It's changed, but it's something of a balance that we are still working on, and I don't think anyone can ignore that. We cannot force anyone to just show up to work today. I don't think that's something that's accepted across any industry at the moment, because you do still need to maintain some form of safety measures so that you don't shut down your whole business because the whole office is infected, for example. So I think that's where AirAsia is at the moment with regards to the question and possible points here.
I'll offer a perspective from here. But one qualifying point, I think, before I do, I think it depends what you do. Obviously, I think we're all from particular sets of industries, and the future of work, we have the luxury and the opportunity to do it remotely. Not all professions and not all people, in fact, a lot of professions and a lot of people around the world don't have that luxury. And so I think the future of work, whether it's hybrid or not, is a slightly different question to the future of travel for business. And I think it's important to note that. But my personal opinion in terms of how business travel will change in the future is, yes, obviously it will change, and there's a lot of tools an increasing number of tools available for us to help make it easier, as you say, Riad. We've all heard rumors of the Facebook rebrand, their investment in the metaverse. There's huge shifts coming over the next 5 years. But I think, my personal view is there's no substitute still for human interaction. And I say this from a very personal point at the moment. Prashant and I are newly colleagues for the last 6 weeks. And I would love to come out and spend time with him and his teams. I would love to spend time getting to know your markets. And you can't do that remotely as effectively as I can. I'm just itching.
Agreed.
Business travel opens up. I'm on the first plane out to hang out with Prashant. I can't wait.
Very, very insightful, Jake, indeed. And see, one of the interesting insights that I had, right, is that I don't know if anyone has read a book on Ikigai. And so there are a lot of talks about, hey, which is the town which has the maximum longevity when it comes to life? And what you realize is that the secret of longevity is not like exercise, diet, not that, but it is actually companionship. It's the fact of genuine human interaction and the fact that, hey, you're interacting with each other. That is what actually keeps you more fulfilled, and that is what keeps you growing. And that is also one of the biggest reasons with the significant rise in mental health issues through the course of the last 18 months, which is the fact that human interaction has been curtailed versus the way that it used to be. And as a result, right, I think human interaction, be it for collaboration in work, be it for just genuinely interacting with each other as people, I think that is bound to come back. I think the question is how much of that is there and how much suffices is going to be the big question. Now, the biggest other challenge that is always there, right, is that we like to compartmentalize our work and we like to do things at a stretch. I think you like to work for, say, 8 hours, and then you'd love to spend some quality time with your family, and then you like to recharge yourself by a great night's sleep for 8 hours. Yeah. The moment everything blends into each other, that is where the challenges start happening, and people are not able to disconnect and then recharge themselves. So I do feel that any future of work solution as well, I think the ability to disconnect is going to be super important. It's not just about whether we are working from home or coming back to the office. The ability to disconnect and being able to recharge yourself is what potentially employers need to continue looking at in order to really ensure that the employees stay productive. Yeah.
I think that's so smart, Vishy, because I think that defining work as it is for all of your team and for your employees is that critical piece, and having that agreed upon. I mean, I can say, I don't know anyone who has worked less in the pandemic, and whether that means, their actual work, healthcare for family members, they all of a sudden became the chef, the cosmetologist, like all of it, so I think understanding what work means for those organizations, and those organizations who have a robust CRM and who've used that to look at productivity of their workers, I think that's what's going to steer and drive some of those conversations around what that next phase is going to look like. Because I think there are arguably a lot of cases that can be made that some people are more productive at home. Some people can, get up, they can focus. There are other people who need that commute to kind of disengage from home life, engage into work life, and be able to have that laser focus and what that means for them. So it depends on their role, it depends on the organization, and it depends on the culture. And understanding your organization's culture and what those thresholds are for how you're going to support your team members is a critical piece. And communicators have to have their finger on the pulse of that in order to stay true and genuine to that, because it affects retention, it affects recruitment, it affects overall health. And, we talk a lot about, we're talking about travel and, being well-rounded. I mean, I can assure you that just because you are traveling to someplace and it's work, unless you are, making that a very specific part of the travel, it doesn't happen. I mean, I've seen parts of the world in airport only and in some conference rooms. So, I mean, I could have been in Prague. I could have been in Canton, Ohio. Like, the conference room likely looked exactly the same. And so when we romanticize some of this travel around, people are doing this nomad thing, they have to understand what the expectations of their employer are around that and what that experience is. Because if they're supposed to be in a specific time zone to be online, and now they shift into a different time zone, what does that do to their family and to that experience in their quarters than where they are? And so there are a lot of those variables where I think on paper, it sounds great, but the execution of that, when you're looking at being with your family and when you're looking at what those logistics are, I think it's really up to the organization to have those parameters and to know how people have been more productive, what support they're offering to increase that, to be able to help them drive the value of the organization, and then be able to drive that value to their end customer as much as their internal stakeholders.
Thanks, and a really diverse perspectives here, right from metaverse to employees and how things can be really practical when we come to the future of work. So let's keep moving. And we start to look into the tech aspects of it. Now, travel and tech is not a dimension itself. It's the tech goes through the travel and it cuts through different touch points. So let's look at the seamlessness from a travel perspective. And this is all about that we know that when the floodgates open, it's going to be chaotic. It's going to be a bunch of people in the airport queues. You're going to have crying babies. It's going to be a long queue and there's going to be problems. Secondly, once you get out of the airport, then it's going to be how do you going to check in for your vaccination status? How are you going to go from point A to point B? Are you used to cashless paying? And then how do you go from there? So let's start to look at some of the trends that are coming in. And one of the trends that we picked up, this was among the influencers and the millionaires. They are looking to short circuit all this because they know that it's coming. And this is where some of the conversations around air taxis started to pick up. So air taxis are can be gas or can be electric. And this is all about that. How are people traveling from one place to another without going through the crowds? And the conversations we started to pick up were really interesting. It was not just about the typical air taxis, but the future of air taxis. So there's a lot of conversations around autonomous cars, but people are also talking about autonomous air taxis or eVTOLs and the kind of complexities, the 3D traffic maps, as well as the data from different cities, so-called accidents that may happen. So the world is looking far beyond the future of travel. Similarly, people are also conversing about the automated flying cars, and there are conversations happening all around the globe. These are some of the conversations that we picked up. So this chart that you see is all about the network analysis, but from Node's perspective. You would see certain bigger bubbles right in the middle, and these are all about the influencers that are starting these conversations and the communities that come together. And we picked up 3 conversations which were very interesting from an air taxi perspective. Number one, mainstream media is talking about the whole eVTOL revolution, and Honda in Japan is also coming up with their own air taxis. But in India, the civil aviation minister is talking about air taxis, not from a tourism perspective, but helping the people on the ground by airlifting them. So travel can have different perspectives. It depends on which market and what node are you looking at. So let's bring this seamlessness to the panel and look at digital transformation happened last year, or was supposed to happen last year. And then consumers also got pretty cashless and touchless. So how does it all come together as travel sector rebounds? This will be the last question that we'll go to our audience Q&A.
Again, on the experience we had, obviously at AirAsia as a group, we had to compress, or we had the opportunity during this downtime to focus on our digitization programs, things that were planned, for 10 years or 5 years ahead. We brought it earlier so we could push the agenda. The whole idea of seamless traveling was our objective. And up to this point today, in fact, our super app, which came out of these 2 years, has created a platform of sorts that not only can you buy tickets, but also you can also upload your certificates, which can be verified as well by the authorities accordingly, and making it easier for somebody to fly with us on top of the touchless approach on things. So we are encouraging people to utilize digital solutions in ensuring that there's no paper touching, so on and so forth. The less we have of that, the better it would be, or the whole psychological aspect of safety with regards to the current pandemic can be allayed to a certain degree in terms of the fears. So yeah, I think digital is very important. Digitization of your business is very important. We've been able to do that with our capabilities during the downtime. We are reaping the benefits obviously now. With the experience we had with Langkawi was a really telling tale, because what we saw was the acceptance by the public themselves. They embraced this whole concept or this new approach on top of the SOPs that were put in place in line with the regulatory requirements, so on and so forth. So, these 2 years, people have changed. How they utilize their, phones or computers, the way they approach the new world that they have to embrace now, I think is totally different. But more importantly, the positiveness of the public accepting it is the best thing that I've seen thus far. So hopefully, with what we're applying going forward here, I think people will have a great experience and much more seamless experience when they fly, not just with us, probably with other airlines as well.
It's interesting. I think what you're talking about there is really sorry, the poll popped up and distracted me. It's super interesting.
Yeah.
I think that what you're effectively talking about there is segmentation, right? Because look, there are different communities of people and different perspectives, and people, depending on their community, will want different things from travel and will want different experiences as they go. And I think one of the things that I think about as an insight professional is how to use segmentation effectively in that kind of situation, because I think really more and more segmentation as a discipline is changing. It's becoming much more dynamic, much more layered, much more affinity based versus, go back 30 years, just segmenting people based on their demographics.
So particularly in the context of digital transformation helping the future of travel, I think the biggest thing that would be there is about creation of more personalized experiences. I think the fact that, like the next time that I step into a Singapore Airlines flight, do they remember that, what were some of the preferences that I had when I was traveling previously, either alone for business, or when I was with family, and what were some of the needs of my family at that point in time? I think these are some of the nuances that are going to come up. The other piece that is also going to be important is traveling is not going to be the same for everybody. I think there is going to be a very distinct class, I believe, between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. So what does it mean for them? The second piece that is also going to be important is what happens to seniors whose risk related to like COVID and contracting an infection might be potentially higher as compared to the general population. So these are potentially areas to ponder over on how the digitization can help cater to some of these segments of people who are going to travel and create more personalized experiences.
And I love all of those examples. I think I would just say that as a self-proclaimed nerd, I love technology. I have every device. I'm ridiculous. I think that we can all also understand that all of us sat on a Zoom call at some time in the last 20 months, and maybe even in the last week, where someone still hadn't unmuted themselves. And everybody's like, you're on mute, you're on mute. So when we look at technology and people, to pretend that this is some perfect ideal experience is ridiculous on its premise, because again, we're dealing with a lot of people who aren't, Luddites of technology. And so understanding that technology can supplement and augment those things, but we are a human first society. And when we look at, what that experience is for people, I think it's going to be important to understand, back to Jake, that segmentation and what is their proficiency with some of that technology. Is digital only a solution, or is that a hindrance? Do you offset some of those costs with then being able to have people there who, the notorious going into a restaurant and restaurants aren't handing out a menu, you have to use a QR code. And I live in an area that for half the year right now, when it's beautiful weather, we have a lot of seniors, and they'll still walk into place and be like, I didn't bring my QR code. And you're like, yeah, that's not how it works. And so, it's understanding that market, how you're looking to communicate with them and what that experience is. And I think, geofencing is going to be a bigger opportunity for a lot of organizations as they move forward, so that they're going to be able to get richer and more robust data on those segmentations for how they're working. And I think looking at connectivity and some of those other elements of, bandwidth, as people are testing, I mean, implementing new technology isn't something where you just flip the switch and it's like, yes, that's perfect. And so when you're doing it in a test case with, during COVID, and then you all of a sudden hit critical mass, does it scale? I think that regression testing and all of those elements have to take effect, because otherwise, if you've now offset some of your staff, offset their roles, change their position, but you haven't figured out how to fill that gap, that's something where customer service will then pick that up. And unless your communications efforts are directly tied to what are those FAQs, what are those opportunities, and how communication can lift up those different values, it's going to be really difficult for organizations to maintain the trust and their reputation. And as those erode, people aren't going to have patience, right? I mean, we all know that you spend a lifetime building a reputation and that credibility, and it can be gone in an instant. And so understanding those nuances, and I think when we focus on human first, people are a lot more understanding than when we try to force everyone into a particular shoot of, no, you must do it this way. If we haven't understood their behaviors, those stresses, those anxieties that they have, especially around travel already, that they're out of their home, they're out of their environment, and what those elements, how they stimulate them differently, I think we're going to be in for a big surprise that maybe long queues at the airport and in entering countries isn't going to be the biggest challenge anymore. But I think we're going to see that will erode some of the value of travel, as opposed to build and buoy it if people have a really terrible experience. And we need to be mindful of what that is and how that keeps people motivated moving forward.
Well said, Johna. And that's why we bring on to one of the questions from our audience. Now, Isabella is asking, while travel bubbles are easier to build among regions that are better recovered because people are vaccinated, what do you see in international travel, both in and out, which from the countries which are hit by COVID the hardest? So we are talking Brazil, we are talking India. What happens to them? They are a big part of our world. Is it going to be just some nations building their own vaccinated lanes, or it's going to be opening up? So what do people think here?
I think this is just a perspective from my end. Yeah. I think honestly, the recovery will be gradual. So even as any government is opening up today, it is opening up to select countries and gradually expanding the scope in terms of which countries can get covered. And that is but natural to happen in the context, because every country would want to protect its citizens and hence start a cooperation first with countries where the chances of a health risk might be lower versus the other, and then gradually keep expanding that. So I do believe it is but natural that things will take a bit of time, particularly in some of the big countries like India, Brazil, etc. There will probably be a lot more domestic traffic that actually continues for some period of time before international travel in and out of those countries fully resume. Yeah? So that would be the way that I would think about it.
Let's hear it from
I think, again, India is no longer closed. More recently, they've become they've allowed in multiple, I guess, with certain procedures in place and protocols in place, they've begun to open up their borders for international flights. I think we're going through the process obviously with them and whatnot, but it's sooner than what I personally thought it would be actually. So going to Vishy's point is correct. Again, countries looking at how to best protect their borders. At the end of the day, Malaysia, for example, we're not open to international travelers except for certain criteria or segmentations or business, for example, but no tourism, for example. So it's going to take some time. I think international borders will always be more mindful, or the countries will be mindful about how they want to open up, so on and so forth. The point about Singapore opening up, they are traveling for, they opened up for certain countries without quarantine, but there are fine lines there. You know, as in any announcement, you read the fine line and you find out that yes, if you come from America into Singapore, you're not going to be quarantined, but you must go via a country or a transit point that has been acknowledged as a safe point, a jump off safe point for you to come into Singapore. If you're not, you're still going to be quarantined. So, you know, people are very careful. Governments are still very careful. My wish, obviously, is that everyone will come out with some level of consistency in terms of the policies. And yes, at one point, I think we all have to live with it, and with certain protocols in place, obviously, but not to the point of having to quarantine people for 14 days or 21 days. That in itself is not going to work for travel in the future. So time will tell, I think. You know, we hope that, you know, the sooner it comes into play in terms of understanding of how to manage each other's expectations, I think is still being discussed, but hopefully sooner than later. I am seeing a lot more sooner than later, so I'm very encouraged with that in mind. But if somebody's asking me, am I flying out to India tomorrow? No, I still need to meet certain protocols first. Maybe by end of the year, yes. We've just announced recently that we will fly to Phuket now because they have a sandbox program there. But yeah, it will happen, but probably not as soon as possible. But no one's going to be left behind. I think everyone's taking their own mode of approaching it. It's just a matter of time only now.
Thank you, Riad. And sooner than later is something that I'll pick up. Just coming towards the end of this webinar. So sooner than later is what we are picking up. And looks like travel is back. We'll be communicating more about it. You'll have the panels again and again. Maybe if you on demand, the panelists will come back. Just a quick one on the polls, guys. So we quickly conducted a poll. Thanks a lot. And to about 64%, the webinar was as per the expectation. 0 said it under-delivered, 64% said it delivered as per the expected, and 36% it exceeded the expectations. How often should we do it? We should do it somewhere around a month or 3 months, somewhere in the middle. So we look forward to having you back again. And thanks a lot, panelists. On demand, we'll get you back as well. And really, thanks for spending 1 hour with us. Thank you.